The Adam and Eve Report. Recent genetics research out of the University of Chicago correlates with the Adam and Eve story in 6 different ways. The Adam and Eve story in the Urantia Book is significantly different than what is found in the Old Testament. This material is provided because this genetics report relates to statements in the Urantia Book that assert that Adam and Eve lived approximately 37,000 years ago and were genetically superior to everyone else on the planet. The Urantia Book says that they instructed their progeny to stick together and create a civilization before spreading out into the rest of the world to share this genetic uplift with the rest of humanity. The geneticists from the University of Chicago were focusing on brain genes and had a representative cross-sample of the current human population. In studying these genes, they noticed that the part of the gene responsible for the production of microcephalin had an extra little piece sticking on it that was present with 70% of the human population. This looked peculiar to them, so they decided to study it. Their research does not indicate what this extra little piece on the microcephalin gene does. However, this report is of interest to Urantia Book readers because the Urantia Book specifically says that Adam and Eve's genetics enhanced brain function, and this is the first correlation related to their research. Their research indicates that this extra little piece probably entered the human gene pool about 37,000 years ago. The Urantia Book says that Adam and Eve arrived on the planet 37,848 years ago. The genetics report indicates that to get to 70% of the human population in 37,000 years is very rapid. In genetics terminology, this is called positive selection. According to the Urantia Book, this was an intentional upgrade. The report indicates that this extra little piece on the microcephalin gene was probably introduced by a single individual. This, of course, is not statistically different than being introduced by a single pair of individuals. The research indicates that this was introduced in Mesopotamia. The Urantia Book is specific about where in Mesopotamia Adam and Eve lived. The sub-Saharan African population has far less of this little piece attached to their microcephalin gene than in other parts of the world. This is consistent with what the Urantia Book states regarding how Adam and Eve's descendants did not migrate for the most part into sub-Saharan Africa. The researchers also studied the brain genes around the microcephalin gene and determined that these coalesce back to 990,000 years ago. The Urantia Book says the first human beings evolved on the planet 993,408 years ago. So recent genetics research correlates with the Adam and Eve story in 6 ways. It also correlates with the Urantia Book story about the first human beings. This report begins with quotes from the Urantia Book that highlight the spiritual equality of all human beings and the importance of acting accordingly. I hope you enjoyed this presentation about how science is catching up to the Urantia Book. Thank you very much for listening, and you're of course encouraged to find out more about this information by exploring the UBtheNEWS.com website.